I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people gift giving for Valentine's Day. It's just when you start comparing yourself, that's always what I ask. It's like, well, what is your intention with the gift? Why are you doing this?
Ultimately, I think all we're saying is that Valentine's Day should be about expressing love in genuine ways to your partner instead of buying products because you feel like you're supposed to. Just reinforcing that kind of materialism and consumerism isn't actually the key to happiness. Hello and welcome to the Radical Empaths podcast. I'm Josh.
And I'm Liz. And in the spirit of our podcast today, that is challenging the orthodox ways of thinking and somewhat strange traditions, we decided that we will create our own traditions on our podcasts to share with all of you. And we are calling it the Holiday Calendar Series.
Yeah, we think that it's worth it to analyze all of the times that our culture collectively decides that an arbitrary date on a calendar dictates that all of us need to think or act and behave in certain ways, or more importantly, to purchase certain consumer goods.
And today we're going to be talking about Valentine's Day. Tis the season, and I wanted to open the floor to Josh for the beginning of our podcast to talk about the history and origins of Valentine's Day. We both found that pretty interesting. So, Josh, if you don't mind sharing some of that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Like I try to do on most of the podcasts here. I find my lane as the history guy. So I try to fill in the context and help to understand how we got to where we are. I mean, you might know this story, but Valentine's Day originally comes from, I just think it's an interesting story from Saint Valentine, who was in the Roman Empire, lived around the time of like 250 AD. And he was known because the Roman emperor at the time had decided that all military age men were not to be married because he knew that the men would have more to live for if they were married and they had families, they had wives and children. So they outlawed marriage and it's made it so that they would be more dedicated soldiers. I thought that was interesting because in that context, Saint Valentine performed a bunch of marriages for these men under the radar. And that happened in secret for almost like a decade until he was caught and ultimately beheaded. So a grim ending, but a beautiful story of love, which the tale was passed down from generation to generation and kind of went through many iterations, which I'm sure I'm not qualified to speak on all of them. But we find ourselves here in the year 2023, and the holiday has evolved and shifted into something that we're all familiar with, which is a very commoditized and commercialized, consumer goods driven holiday that's kind of centered around selling and buying cards and flowers and chocolates and all that stuff. And, there's a lot to be said about it. So like, I want to get you back into here, like to talk about the emotions of it, because, there's value to treating your loved one and your sweetheart with gifts on a certain day, right? You would agree with that, right? Like the ultimate sentiment of what's behind Valentine's Day is probably seems whole.
I don't know if I agree completely with that, because to me, it depends on the love language of the person that you're with or people or whatever the situation is, or even the love language that you speak to yourself. Like, I don't think that everyone's love language is necessarily gift buying or receiving a special token or gesture of love. Some people, like, jewelry is expensive. Like, you spend like hundreds of dollars or whatever. Some people go out to dinner and have a nice meal together, and that's their way of celebrating something. But to me, you can do that any time of the year. And it just seems like, I don't want to say forced, because it just sounds maybe like too cynical to say that, but it just seems like following something so sheepishly is redundant to me sometimes. And I just feel like, oh, you expect the same thing, you know what to do, this and that, get dressed up, red lips, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, it gets old. That's all I'm saying. Like, do you not want to do something differently? Like maybe, do that in March or in August Like, you could do that any time of year. That's my point.
Right.
So why one time of year? I mean, like what you said, it's completely commoditized. So, I mean, if you want to comment back to that, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it hits like that hits like the main check of why we're like doing this series on our podcast here, kind of a sub series of the larger topics that we want to be discussing, is because ultimately on all these like Hallmark type of holidays, we have a similar type of critique, and we end up feeling like, why is it that on this one arbitrary calendar date we're being told that we're supposed to do this one thing, and like ultimately who benefits from that? I think that's always a really important question to keep in mind, is like, who is benefiting from any given action or any given narrative that exists in society at large. And following that trail leads to some important places that I think we want to try to get to. So I mean, that you hit on the important part right away. I was trying not to go full steam ahead with the radical empath perspective, but you took it there right away, which I like. I like it. But I was saying, like, ultimately, like, for some people, if, like you said, gift giving is their language, then, you know, whatever the stereotypical view of what Valentine's Day is might be really meaningful to them, to receive some jewelry and to receive flowers or chocolates or whatever it might be. But we like to interject our opinions and views and perspectives about that, because I mean, ultimately, like, I think I would like to just kind of like lay out my main thought about this topic, which is that I think that I'd argue there's probably more cultural harm done than good. Like, there might be, like I said, those people who really would value the certain things like flowers and chocolates or whatnot. But I'd say that at large, it causes more harm, because what's happening is that we're reinforcing a narrative at large in our culture that love and connection with your partner is going to be kind of tied to like commercial consumer goods and something that you purchase at a specific time when you're told to. And, I just think that just reinforcing that kind of materialism and consumerism isn't actually the key to happiness. And that's something to always be wary of, is in our society, someone trying to tell you that buying something is going to be the key to your happiness. So, or the key to a successful relationship.
I love sentimental gifts. And I love thoughtful gifts. And I think that there's like a time and place for anything like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people gift giving for Valentine's Day. It's just maybe when it feels forced, or maybe when it feels like, oh man, well, Phil got his wife a dozen roses last year, and I only got my wife 10 somehow. So I need to get like 24 roses this year to beat Phil. Damn it. Like, I just like that kind of mentality is like when you start comparing yourselves, maybe not that aggressively, but like when you compare yourselves like in that even like minuscule of a way, it just becomes like okay, what's your intention? That's always what I ask. It's like, well, what is your intention with the gift? Why are you doing this? Like, it could be because you really love your partner and this is their love language. And, you've talked about this for a yearly thing. Like, I want to be showered with gifts on this day. It makes me feel very loved and special, whatever. But, I think ultimately it does do more harm than good, because there's a lot of people that, either they don't have family or loved ones or a significant other, or they wish they did. And it's just, maybe they lost them or recently or something. My heart goes out to those people on every freaking holiday, calendar holiday date. I just think about the people that it excludes. And ultimately, that's why I don't favor these types of holidays, is because it ends up excluding, a small or large amount of people. And that breaks my heart. And I hate that. So that's kind of my thing with it too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And yeah, I mean, actually to piggyback on that too, another thing I wanted to mention is that there's a fair amount of pretty deceptive advertising and marketing schemes around Valentine's Day specifically to prey and target on, single people and kind of like monetizing loneliness, which is just a really disgusting and ugly thing to observe. it's such a
Yeah.
gross thing to see, but like, where there is some kind of pain or suffering, there's someone there trying to make a buck. And
Yeah.
I'd say Valentine's Day is no different there, much
No.
like the rest of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, just mainly the thought that you don't want to be reinforcing materialism and consumerism and like you mentioned the like competition, kind of like a pissing match between people to see who had the most roses, or who could, who had the most chocolate bar, the biggest chocolate bar to which, by the
Yeah.
way, lots of the chocolates, Russell Stover chocolates or whatever, they're going to be filled with milk powders and everything, which, this is a vegan podcast, and I'm sure we'll have lots of episodes talking about
Hmm.
why that even is, why you find milk powder and
The
everything. So we,
wastefulness of all the ribbons that you wrap your crap in. I mean, we could go on it for days about the lack of, there's just so much waste involved with gift giving sometimes in general, but
yeah, yeah, and a lot of
also
this,
unnecessary exploitation as well.
absolutely, and a lot of this goes back to the concepts that we talked about in episode 3, which was mindful consumption, because like dealing with or with a holiday like this one, or like many of them, you have to be a mindful consumer. You can't, like we said in that episode, you can't fall into the shopping trap. You can't feel like that you got to go, if you don't get the dozen roses, and if you only get the half dozen roses, that
Mhm.
it's not going to be enough and you're going to have to make up for it with this extra thing. It shouldn't be so transactional. It shouldn't be like there's a dollar amount attached to everything. It shouldn't feel like that you have to compete with everybody else. You're kind of just contributing to the same, capitalist type of mindset that's hyper competition, hyper consumerism, like make a dollar, all that stuff. Like ultimately, I think all we're saying is that Valentine's Day should be about expressing love in genuine ways to your partner, instead of about buying products because you feel like you're supposed to, when that's ultimately just going to line the pockets of these ultimately extremely wealthy corporations anyways.
Well, let me add in, it Valentine's Day should not only be a day to show your partner loves in the way genuine ways that they want. Maybe just look at Valentine's Day as a way, for me at least, to, I mean, of course, make that special in your own way, however you want. But I think it just a reminder would be, maybe it's a reminder to show everyone love all the time. You know what I mean? And have empathy and understanding, and just that can be a reminder as well for holidays, because there's people that, you know, they don't have someone to share it with, like I said, and that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And always, be grateful. Be grateful for what you do have. If you're, if you don't have to worry about the deceptive marketing
Mhm.
against single people because you're in a happy relationship, like what is listen, I situation here, like that's, but I still hold space to be super empathetic to people who would be put into that position, because that's complete BS that would that would be something that would even be a concern of yours. So I
Right.
mean, holding space for all the different types of nuance and everything, every possible situation that might exist out there that leaves people feeling a certain way. Your feelings are valid. You feel this way for a reason, and it's not your fault that you feel this way.
We hope that we don't sound like two hippies over here just being like, give love to everyone, show kindness. It's like, but really though, like, if Valentine's Day is meant for just like heteronormative couples and not like, not everyone, and not like, no matter if you're in a relationship or not, like, then I don't want to be a part of it. Like, just make sure to include everybody. That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's the ultimate like principle to keep in mind. It also seems like a good place to wrap up our show today. We're doing a little bit quicker podcasts, and we're just trying to kind of wrap up some of these ideas that we have about these holidays. So we'll definitely have more coming. I mean, do you want to give some little hints to future? I mean, you guys know the holidays, you know the calendar.
We're definitely already talking about the Mother's Day episode, because I find that one tied to veganism, and we're really excited about that
The
one.
dairy
But
industry specifically. So we'll be getting into
dun
that
dun
in
dun.
May.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. We
Yeah.
appreciate all of the support, and as always, we love to hear from you guys. So If
Yeah.
you want to send us a message or have a shout out or maybe even become one of our guest speakers on the list that's growing more and more as we speak, then we'd appreciate to hear from you. So
That's right. Yeah, you can reach out to us. We got multiple ways now. We've just started an Instagram. So if you are listening to this and you're on Instagram, we appreciate your follow. You can find us on all the platforms that we're on, at least. Radicalempathspod on Instagram, and then that's YouTube as well. We've been all of our episodes are on YouTube. We're creating short content. We're creating just additional content as well.
trying to give some versatility to the length and variation to that.
Totally.
Yeah.
We're going to keep spicing it up like we say in every episode. We're trying to change things up. So, yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And like Liz said, if you, are interested in have something to share, Radical Empath Perspective, you can also email us directly at radicalempathspod@gmail.com. So like and follow and subscribe and give us a rating if you can in whatever podcast platform you listen to. It helps us out a lot in the algorithms and whatnot.
And one last note is that if anyone has any ideas or anything they'd like to hear us talk about, please don't be shy and let us know. With that, we'll say goodbye. I'll see you later.
See you later.